G'day, how's it going? Sholstein Photography here. In my last video, I mentioned that I was going to look at the origins of my aviation photography, going back to when it started, moving forward to where I am now. And I did mention I'd be doing that in some parts. So if you haven't seen it, go have a look at part one. It gives you where I actually started with my first airshow back in 2014 and moves through to 2022, taking in the three air shows I did between that period. Like always, if you like what you're seeing, please like, comment, subscribe. Helps me to get my videos out there to people. With the comments, if you want to add some constructive criticism, as I said in the first part of this video series, I am fairly new to doing the videos, so any constructive criticism would be helpful to get me doing videos that people want to see, basically. So we'll get straight into it. So far we've looked at what equipment I was using. So as you saw in that part one, if you've seen it, started with the Canon 1000D and a couple of kit lenses for it. Moved on to the Canon 700D, and for a little while there just using the kit lenses that came with that as well, before picking up a Tamron 16-300mm lens as a bit of a general purpose lens, and the Tamron 150-600mm lens. So the next airshow I'm going to look at is Avalon 2023. And so for Avalon 2023, I'm still using the 700D with the 16-300mm Tamron and the 150-600mm Tamron. And by this stage, I've also added in the little nifty 50 lens. So I've got that for static displays, that sort of stuff. Not one that I use a lot at air shows, but one that I have used a little bit at other times. The good thing with this is it gets down to f1.8, which has come in very handy sometimes when I've been in some very low light conditions and made some little mistakes, like leaving part of the tripod at home, a little screw part that screws into the bottom of the camera and then connects to the tripod. Left that at home one time when I went to Vivid at Sydney, and would have been pretty much a disaster with the 700D and the 16-300, because anyone who's used both of those probably well aware that the low light capabilities aren't fantastic. Getting the 50mm on there, being able to get down to f1.8 meant I could get a lot more light on the sensor and actually come back with some pictures that were usable. Anyway, onto the air shows. So 2023 saw me at Avalon Airshow. And anyone who knows Avalon Airshow will know it's the largest airshow in Australia. And it happens every 2 years. So the pictures that I'm going to be looking at here are from 2023, not the latest one that took place in 2025. So if you see part one, you'll see the type of photos I was starting to get. Started off, well, the quality was pretty poor, even though I was very happy at the time. Moving forward to getting some slightly better pictures. So we'll start with the C17 Globemaster here. You can see starting to get some pretty clear pictures. Very easy to see the writing on this C17. From front to back, focus isn't too bad. Starting to get fairly happy with some of the pictures I'm starting to produce. At this point, I'm still using aperture priority. I sort of mentioned previously that I was using aperture priority because of the other types of photography I was doing, where I was getting landscapes, that sort of stuff. Really didn't get into shutter priority until quite recently, and I think that's made a massive difference in what I'm producing now to what I was producing. The hit rate of keepable or usable photos, I guess, is certainly much higher now that I'm using shutter priority. You can see still, even though I'm using the aperture priority, I'm pretty happy with the photos I'm getting. Very clear, focus is good. Learned to use the back button focus, which makes a big difference too. But you can see just how clear these pictures are. Like the little star effect off of the light there. Yeah, very happy with those Globemaster pictures from that Avalon Airshow. The thing with the Globemaster ones are that they're not moving super fast, which makes a big difference. You can see we move on to the F-35 here, and we are really starting to lose the quality. Like, it's not a terrible picture, but it's certainly not one that would make my keeper list these days. And it's a real shame because it's quite a good action shot with the jet obviously coming in quite quick and starting to climb, letting off flares, got the vortices trailing off the wing edges. And this could have been a really good photo if it was a little bit better focused, and if I'd maybe panned a bit better, could have got it a bit neat, bit nicer. But starting to get some good shots of the pictures, nice and clear. A little bit of graininess, a little bit of noise in them, but overall, pretty happy with them. The one thing that I'm missing though, and you can see it quite clearly here, is that sense of speed when we're looking at prop planes. I've got the props basically frozen in this. And as I said, that all comes down to the settings that I was using. And if we look at the last example there from Avalon, again, happy with the actual picture, but not happy with the fact that the props are just pretty much frozen. Makes a big difference, I think, and I've learned quite a lot over the years. And now, when I'm taking my pictures of the prop planes, you'll notice that in the pictures to come, there'll be a lot more of that prop blur. So from Avalon, I moved on to the next air show, which was where I went over to New Zealand for Warbirds over Wanaka in 2024. And this is the first time that I've started to use shutter priority. So I've changed my settings, and I've been doing quite a bit of research into it. Watched a number of YouTube videos, listening to photographers talk about what settings they use, and shutter priority kept coming up, and they talked about getting that prop blur, which I didn't really think about before viewing these types of videos. So I think it was a good thing to get on there, have a look at what other people were doing, and seeing what you could actually do. So for New Zealand, I'm still running the 700D, the 150 to 600 mm Tamron lens, and the 16 to 300 as well. But as I said, New Zealand's where I really started to look for that prop blur, and looking at the shutter speeds even for the jets, just ramping that up a bit so I could get much clearer, nicer pictures. And I think you'll see that the pictures really start to get, well, in my opinion, they start to get a lot better from this particular air show. And you can see here with the C-130, I'm starting to get a little bit of prop blur. When we look at the actual settings for this one, you can see the shutter speed's down to 200th of a second. That's about the upper limit of what I shoot now. I try and get my shutter speed somewhere between a 60th of a second to 200th of a second, usually sit it in and around about 100th to 125th of a second. The thing that I also started to capture here in New Zealand, which I hadn't really seen before, were these vortices off the props. And I didn't really know why they were there. Did a bit of research later on, and it just comes down to the fact that we were a bit colder in New Zealand than what I was used to in some of the air shows I've been to in Australia, and so it was just creating those vortices off of the props that, as I said, I hadn't really seen before. And the wonderful thing with Wanaka was not just that it was a great air show with some fantastic planes, but the location was just absolutely spectacular. I mean, you got the mountains in the background, snow-capped, fantastic place to take pictures of planes, really. Now, if we move on, you can see again, we've got the C-130 again, got the prop blur happening. You can see these lines here. That's actually the vortices. It's not actually the prop. But, got a little bit of prop blur, but not full discs. That's the vortices again. And if we look at the settings for that one, again, I'm fairly high with the shutter speed at 1/200th of a second, which is why when you look at the prop blur, it's just a little bit of prop blur, not a lot. This one you can see there's very little blur, if any, and the background is frozen. Now, I still will take a picture like this, particularly if it's an aeroplane that I haven't captured before. I want to get a really nice, clear picture of the planes that I'm capturing. So every now and then I will still up the shutter speed so that I can get those nice, clear pictures, and you can see just how clear that is. You can even read the writing here. Really like this picture. Love the smoke trail. Love the vortices off of the prop, and I just love that background. It's a fantastic background. Great place to shoot. I'd love to go back to Wanaka to do it all again. And you can see the reason why we've captured it so clear is I've upped the shutter speed to 2,500th of a second. So much quicker shutter speed on this one. But as I said, I was starting to look to get this prop blur. And you can see I'm starting to get it on these particular pictures. And what we need to do when we are looking at that shutter speed being a lot slower is we need to make sure that we're panning. So I'm also starting to learn to pan with the aircraft. So panning just means that you actually move the camera and try and match the speed of the plane you're taking a picture of, so that you can get some sharp detail like I have here, while still having a slow shutter speed to get, as you can see, the prop blur that I'm getting here. And I've got some pretty good prop blur here. When we look at the settings, you can see that I'm down to 1/160th of a second here. So it's not down to the slowest that I'll do, but it's starting to get there. It's not even really at where I sort of try and find. I guess what I found is sort of the sweet spot at 100th to 125th of a second. It's a little bit higher, but still getting some good prop blur there. Then we look at some of the helicopters. Now I've got a little bit of blur on the rotors here, and again you can see the vortices that are happening at the tip of the rotors here. But I've got this helicopter, it's nice and clear. Love the little star effect on the light here. When we look at the settings that I've got it down to 100th of a second. Now, I know that I said that's pretty much a sweet spot for the prop planes, but for the helicopters, I want to get that down even lower. I want to get more of this blur on the rotors, and they don't spin quite as quick. So you got to get the shutter speed down even lower to start getting that blur on the rotors. but still really like that photo. Just love the vortices that, coming off of the tips of the rotors. How clear that picture is of the plane. Like, you can zoom in and it's still nice and sharp. And as I said, I do love the effect I've got there from the light with the little star. Moving on to some of the jets, you can see now starting to get quite clear shots of the jets. And when you even look at the pilot, you can see very clearly the pilot there giving a wave to the crowd. And the reason that that's so clear is looking again at shutter speed. I've upped that to 4,000ths of a second, so quite fast. Really freezing the action, but when you consider that that is at focal length of 600 and it's that clear, I'm pretty happy with how that's turned out. And you can see starting to get the panning right. So you can see that this particular aeroplane is really well in focus. It's super clear, super sharp. The focus, you can even make out individual fingers as he's fiddling on the panel there. But that, I'm very happy with that. Still getting the prop blur. When you look at the settings, 1/160th of a second, still probably a bit quicker than what I would normally do, but the fact that the props are basically at right angles to us, all in line with this, I guess is what you'd say. You're not going to see a lot of prop blur anyway because of the angle, but that 1/60th just allowed me to capture that plane very clear, very sharp. And you can see starting to really get some good prop blur here. Almost got the full disc on this Mustang. But at the same time, managed to keep the focus. And it's very, very clear shot, this one. So if I was to give a tip to anybody doing the aviation photography, it's to look at that shutter priority. Some people will be able to do the whole manual thing, cover all the bits and pieces. At the moment, I'm not quite there, so shutter priority is what I use, and I think that it's very effective. And the last one I've got there is just of the Mosquito. Fantastic plane, this one. Would love to see one flying in Australia. I believe this one was the first time it flew in an air show in New Zealand, or at least for a long time after its restoration. I believe it got sold off to somewhere in North America, so I might not see it again. It's a real shame. It's a fantastic aeroplane, the Mosquito. Really love it. Just such an iconic plane, and just to be able to capture it so nice and clearly. Really happy with the shot I got here. In fact, I was very happy with quite a number of the photos I got on the day at Wanaka. And you can see the settings again. This one, I've actually got it down to that 125th of a second that I'm looking to try and get. I think, as I said, that's pretty much the sweet spot. And although you can't really see the prop blur because of the angle of the props, if that was coming front on or from behind, you would see nearly a full disc on the props there. So as I said, first air show where I was really looking to try and get, I was looking at shutter priority as my go-to setting. And I think you can see from the photos I've shown previously in part one of this, and from when I was at Avalon, I think that's where my photos of aircraft really started to take a bit of a leap. Moving on to Williamtown. Now, Williamtown is an interesting place to take photos. It's a RAF base where our F-35s are stationed, and a lot of our Hawk 127 trainer jets are also stationed. But it's also a it's a public airport, so commercial jets fly in and out in between the RAF jets taking off. So it's a great place to take photos. You can get a variety of different aircraft. So, for instance, the Jetstar um, commercial airliner here. What's that? It's an Airbus A320. And obviously the military jets. Now, the reason I went up to Williamtown was that I heard that the F-22 Raptors were in town. So I thought, not going to miss out on that. Took a trip up there, spent most of the day waiting for them to come out. But fortunately, about 15 minutes before I was going to leave, came across that the F-22s were going to come out. So I stayed around for those and managed to get some pictures of them. Looking at that, I'm starting to get some nice clear pictures again. I was a little bit disappointed with some of the F-22 stuff. Wasn't quite as clear as I would like, but starting to, my hit and miss ratio is starting to, well, my hit ratio is starting to go up. My miss ratio is starting to go down. I'm getting some nice clear photos. You can see my settings, 1,600 for a second for that taxiing Hawk. And when we look at the commercial airliner, 1/4,000th of a second, which is how I'm getting the very clear pictures. It's basically just freezing the action. But as I said, the F-22s did come out. Got some nice shots of the F-22s, very clear in the cockpit there. The rest of the plane's pretty good. As I said, would have liked to have got a little bit sharper, but I'm fairly happy with how that one's come out. When we look at the settings, we're 1,600th of a second again. For the next one, also 1,600th of a second. So fairly sharp, fairly fast shutter speeds. The fact that these guys are taxiing means that I'm getting pretty clear shots. It was quite hot on the day, so there is a bit of heat haze, which accounts for some of the fact that they're not 100% really sharp, but there's not much you can do about heat haze, unfortunately. But the actual photos I took, I think, were pretty good. Got the C-17 Globemaster touching down. I like this one. You get that sense of action and speed from the smoke coming off of the tyres as it touches down and hits the runway. And you can see that, again, I've got that 1,600th of a second shutter speed. Now, most of the jets I take at least 2,000ths of a second. Just freezes that action. I'm going to start looking to try and get the shutter speeds down a bit on the jets as well. Work on my panning while I'm taking the jets, because the jet planes, and they don't have the props to blur, and a lot of the time they're at a height where you don't really see the ground, so it's not too bad having the higher shutter speeds there, and a lot of the times you've got the vortices coming off or the afterburner to show that it's really moving. But when they're lower to the ground and you can see some of the actual ground, I'm going to start looking at trying to get the shutter speed down a bit, start panning with them and getting that sense of speed that way. I've seen a lot of people on YouTube and people's pictures on Facebook where I see a lot of that. So that's one thing I'm going to try and start working on. But you can see nice clear picture again. You can see the pilots, they're looking at each other, probably having a bit of a conversation before they take off. It's very clear. Then you got the jet wash coming out there, and we're looking at 1,600 for a second again. And then we got them actually taking off. So again, pretty clear. It's not super clear, but that's not bad considering how far away it was. I mean, it's at the other end of the airport as it's taking off. It's moving away from me. And you can see it picked it up again with its with the wheels retracting. And our Shutter speed there again is 1,600 per second, and it'll be there for both. So after the Williamtown adventure, which was just a day trip up to Williamtown, where we took in obviously the F-22s, and then went off to Port Stephens, Nelson Bay, took some pictures around there, just to make a day of it, basically. From there, the next air show was again the Central Coast, back at Warnervale. I've only got a couple of pictures of this one, but you can see starting to get that prop where I've got a full disc here on this particular picture of the Avenger, while still keeping the aeroplane pretty clear. Now I'm pretty critical these days. I'd like this to be just a little bit sharper, but when we look at the actual shutter speed, I've actually got this down to a 60th of a second. So we're talking a pretty quick shutter speed here. That's how I got the full disc for the prop blur. The fact that I've kept the aeroplane as clear as I have at 60 per second, I'm actually pretty happy with that particular photo. And if we move on, we've then got the F-35, and you'll see just how much clearer my photos are now. And you can see, looking into the cockpit, it's pretty clear. You can even see the little board that they have on their thigh. I'm assuming with where they're supposed to be flying, what they're supposed to be doing on the day. Got the afterburner coming out, nice vortices coming off the wingtips, and we're pretty clear. I mean, you can see the kangaroo quite clearly there. And that one, we've got a shutter speed of 4 thousandths of a second. So, as I said, I upped the shutter speed for the fast jets to try and really capture them in real clear, nice and focused. And again, just got the F-35 going away. This one's a little less clear, but it is as it's moving away. It's quite a distance away from me actually in this shot. But I'm getting the pretty clear picture. You can still kind of make out the kangaroo. Got the vortices coming off of the jet intakes, off of the wingtips. Got the afterburner happening. And for this one, some nice light as it hits the jet. And we're looking at a shutter priority again of 4 thousandths of a second. So you can see that moving to that shutter priority, I think, has made a massive difference to the pictures that I'm now taking. The fact that I can get in closer than what I could at the beginning with this 150 to 600 mm lens also made a massive difference. Even when I'm using the 16 to 300, which I used to change over to every now and then, getting a lot closer to the action, getting much sharper photos. So that's it for this part. Again, like, comment, subscribe if you like what you're seeing. If you do like what you're seeing, come and join me on Facebook. Look up Sholstein Photography. You'll see my Facebook page. Really trying to grow that, trying to get my pictures out there so people can see. There's no point, I think, as I said previously, having them sitting on a hard drive for just me to look at. Might as well get them out there and let other people see the photos as well. Make it worthwhile going to these air shows and taking these pictures. Get them out there so lots of people can see them. So anyway, we'll come back for the final part of this, and we'll look at my year in review. So we've got a couple of air shows we're going to be looking at here. So I started with the Hunter Valley Air Show at the beginning of the year. Moved on to the Mudgee Air Show, which took place around about the middle of the year. And then more recently, went to Riverfire in Brisbane to check out the planes flying through the city of Brisbane, which, when you think about it, you can't really do better than having planes flying through the city. Great place to actually take photos. And then finally, I've got the RAF Base Richmond Air Show for the 100-year anniversary of RAF Base Richmond. So come and join me again to take in the year in review, 2025. Until then, see you later.